Coach John Madden passed away this morning, December 28th, at the age of 85. It was an unexpected passing, according to sources from the NFL. It is a sad loss and one that hits just a little bit harder because football fans got to watch an amazing retrospective on Coach Madden that aired on Christmas Day that had interview segments with the coach there. So it felt like, at least on the outside, that the coach was going to be okay. So 3 days after that airing, seeing that he passed definitely hits a little bit harder than it might have otherwise. We've known that the coach has not been in the best of health. He's been out of the spotlight for quite some time now. But the death still comes as a bit of a surprise and a bit of a shock. And it's a very sad time for sports fans, for football fans, and even for sports video game fans. A little bit of background on my interest in and I guess me being a fan of Coach Madden. I never played a down of football ever, traditional football. The only football experience I ever had was in 7th and 8th grade at Blessed Sacrament School in Holyoke, Massachusetts, where I would play touch football after lunch. So we had like 10 minutes to play touch football. I had one reception on one target because no one would ever throw me the ball because I'm a thin, awkward nerd that wore glasses that had hands of stone. But I got one ball thrown my way because I was completely open and I caught it for a touchdown. It was the best 2 minutes of my life. I was excited and that was it. I never played football again, and with good reason. Once I was in high school, I was more interested in academics and in video games, and I knew that I had no athletic talent, so I was not playing football at all. But interestingly enough, in 1988, 89, and into 1990, I started to watch football on Sunday afternoons with my brother, and we would make an afternoon of it. We would go to the local convenience store. We would pool our allowance money. We would buy a big bottle of Sprite and some donuts or something. We would just have something to eat and drink while we were watching football. And it was kind of like a guy bonding thing. It was really cool. And I miss those days. But it was a lot of fun. And that's where I learned how football worked. And a lot of that was due to watching Coach Madden and Pat Summerall and their telecasts on the NFL on Fox. While there were other broadcasters that were notable, Dick Enberg, for example, is one voice that springs to mind off the top of my head. Coach Madden had a certain enthusiasm about him. It was infectious. And whenever he would talk about a certain play that happened on the field and try and break it down with a telestrator, I was all over it. I was interested in it. I wanted to know more. These days, I understand a lot more about football, even though I've never played. I understand most of the rules. I understand all of the official calls, hence the referee shirt, for example. But I learned so much, despite not playing the sport, just from watching games on TV and listening to analysis from Coach Madden and other color commentators, I should say. That's where I learned a lot about the sport. And that happened for 3 years or so. As I became older, became an adult, I would watch football more frequently. Sundays became football Sundays during the fall, and honestly, they still are. I have my favorite broadcasters today, but to me, Coach Madden was always in a league of his own. And I was well aware of Coach Madden's achievements on the gridiron itself. With the Raiders, you can see the archive footage of him stalking the sidelines. He was good at what he did. And the fact that he retired early and went to the broadcast booth was a blessing for football broadcast and for budding fans of the sport like myself. It really worked out well. When Pat Summerall passed away, and when Coach Madden went to NBC to work with Al Michaels, I thought that was a great pairing, and I thought that Coach Madden continued to be on top of his game and continued to bring the passion and enthusiasm that I had loved for years and years. So that's the actual sport of it. But of course, when I'm bearing the referee shirt and with my knowledge of video games and my love of sports video games, you know that I'm going to talk about the Madden football series. Before playing the Madden football games, I'd only played two football video games with any kind of regularity. One of them was Leland Quarterback, which was in arcades as a coin op that would later be converted to a game called John Elway's Quarterback for the NES, which was programmed by Rare. The other game was a game for the Commodore 64 called Fourth and Inches, which was an Accolade game, which was developed by the same team that gave us Hardball. And if you've watched my Unsealed episodes, you know about my love of Hardball on the Commodore 64. The Commodore 64 is where my love of sports games kind of sprouted its seeds and started to grow. So moving on from there, the first football game that I played with any regularity after that was this guy right here, John Madden Football, and this is the Super Nintendo version. So yeah, this is the version that isn't really as good, but this was my first exposure, not just to football simulations per se, but also to Coach Madden in video game form as well. And you can see his happy face here. He's very into what he's doing. He's very energetic. If you've played this game before, and I had the privilege of playing and reviewing this for Pat Contry's Super Nintendo guidebook, it's not great. It has not held up great. And honestly, if I look back at me playing the game in 1991 and 1992, I didn't enjoy the game all that much. It was very stuttery, but it was an initial effort. It was EA trying to make games for a new console that I really didn't have a great handle on. So I was very forgiving of the game. Once I got my Genesis a year later and I started to get Madden games for that, of course, things changed. The animation, which was smoother, the sound I thought was a bit better. The Madden games on the Genesis had battery backup before the Super Nintendo games did, so I was able to save stats on there. Starting with Madden 94, we got NFL on Fox broadcasting, kind of. So you could hear the NFL on Fox theme, which was cool, and you could hear Coach Madden and his Maddenisms like, boom, he's on his back, or heck of a play. You could hear him say those things, and that was just so cool. Just the idea of voice in video games was still something that was, I mean, it was getting to be more used, but it still sounded great. Then when we got to the PlayStation generation and the Saturn generation, we had full motion video thanks to CD-ROM technology, so we could see Coach Madden and Pat Summerall in a simulated broadcast studio talking about the matchup before the game, just like they would on the NFL on Fox. And after the game, we would hear a little bit of a breakdown as well. We would see James Brown in the studio too. So it felt like an actual TV broadcast. And for someone like me, who had always been interested in the broadcast aspect, someone who was growing as a public address announcer and would later be a DJ, putting those skills to use, I was always interested in broadcast and presentation. That has always been a big deal for me. And if you've watched my Unsealed videos and heard me talk about the difference between Madden and NFL 2K, I've touched a lot on the differences in broadcast and how close to authentic TV styling they would be. But really, the PlayStation version of Madden 97 was the first to do that and really caught my attention. Once we moved by the 32-bit generation of consoles and we got to the PlayStation 2, the Xbox, and the GameCube, things changed again. Coach Madden was able to record more lines and sound more authentic in giving analysis, and he was working alongside Al Michaels, who was a legendary play-by-play broadcaster, so the two of them did so well together. But it wasn't just the commentary, it was the coach putting in plays and adding his 2 cents on strategy and his knowledge of the game, which added another air of authenticity to the games that you really wouldn't see elsewhere. John Madden's name on any kind of football activity added credibility because we knew who Coach Madden was and what he had done for the sport. So Electronic Arts signing him to a long-term deal and putting his name on games and allowing him to be such an active force in development was an absolutely huge deal, and it is awesome that it happened. And Coach Madden was active with the games all the way into the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 generation, when he lent his voice talent to talking about Football 101 and some basic football tutorials for people who wanted to play Madden games but didn't have a lot of football background. And that would have been perfect for somebody like me in the 80s who had no background but wanted to play football games anyway. I would have loved this as a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid back in the day. Unfortunately, the technology didn't exist yet, but it was really cool to be able to see it for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. Sadly, of course, as Coach Madden's health deteriorated, he faded into the background. Electronic Arts didn't even put his name or didn't put his face on the game. You just had his name. And that was unfortunate. That was something I really didn't like very much, although I understood it. And now here we are, where Coach Madden is no longer with us. It'll be interesting to see what Electronic Arts does with with Coach Madden's legacy and what Coach Madden's estate will allow. I'm hoping that they will do something that is befitting and honoring of someone who really brought video game football to the forefront. His name is always going to be attached to video game football from now until the end of video gaming, whenever that is, if that even happens. And it has been awesome to be a part of that for as many years as it's been. I've been playing football video games as long as Madden football games have been around for console, and that's been a long time. 1991, it's now 2021, so that's 30 years. That is definitely a long time. So thank you very much to Coach Madden. My condolences to his family, to his friends, to his players, his counterparts, his colleagues during this very sad time. He will be missed, but he will never be forgotten. Rest easy, Coach Madden.